struck up what he must have hoped would be a conversation. He asked if I had seen something called the Latin Quarter. I told him I had not, though I later realized that I had.
"Well," he said, "you'll have to go back. If you haven't seen the Latin Quarter, you haven't seen Paris."
The following year I returned with enough money for 2 weeks, determined to find a job, which I did after 3 weeks, and then stayed for 6 months. Later, I came to know Paris well enough to realize that I would never really know it. The sight of a heavy porte cochere closing on an inner courtyard seemed to be a characteristically Parisian sight. I made some Parisian friends, most of whom had not been born in Paris, but who were proud to think themselves Parisian. They showed me places I was never able to find again on my own, and they shared a certain Parisian art de vivre, sitting in traffic jams as a forme flânerie, parking illegally as a defense of personal liberty, savoring window displays as though the streets were a public museum. They taught me the tricky etiquette of pretending to argue with waiters, and the gallantry of staring at beautiful strangers. As a student, I read novels and histories, and tried to match the information to the visible facts. I learned to distinguish one revolution from the next. Eventually, I was able to explain the column in the Place de la Bastille, and I could even understand some of the political graffiti. But there was always something cumbersome and incongruous about this deliberately acquired knowledge. It was the baggage of a historical tourist. I read all 7,000 entries in Jacques Hilaire's Dictionnaire historique des rues de Paris, and gazed at all the photographs. But in the open air of Paris, the most brazenly illuminated monument was still a labyrinth on many levels. Even when my French had improved enough for eavesdropping, the crowds on the boulevards and the faces at windows were reminders that a changing metropolis with a population of millions can never be comprehended by a single person. The adventures that follow were written as a history of Paris recounted by many different voices. The book begins at the dawn of the French Revolution and ends a few months ago. There are also some excursions to the medieval and prehistoric past. It traces the spread of the city from the island in the Seine that was the home of the Parisian tribe to the mushrooming suburbs that inspire more fear today than when they were patrolled by highwaymen and wolves. The idea was to create a kind of mini-human comedy of Paris, in which the history of the city would be illuminated by the real experience of its inhabitants. Each tale is true, and each is complete in itself, but there are also correspondences and crossroads, both literal and mysterious, which serve as landmarks in time and space. Certain districts and buildings reappear at different stages, seen through different eyes, transformed by events, obsessions, visionaries, architects, and the passing of time. No completely accurate map of Paris existed until the end of the 18th century, and few people wandered far from their own quartier. Even today, the discovery of Paris, or of any great city, entails a degree of disorientation and distraction. A pattern of streets, a certain topographical texture, a combination of climate, smell, building stone, and the flurry of humanity creates a particular sense of reality. Every vision of the city, however private or eccentric, belongs to its history as much as its public ceremonies and monuments. A single viewpoint would have turned these representative adventures into a scripted tour. Narrative devices and perspectives were naturally suggested by a place, a historical moment, or a personality. Each tale was written with a flavour of the time in mind. It demanded its own explanations and imposed its own forms of courtesy to the past. Descriptions of the architectural transformations of Paris, the development of its police force and government, its infrastructure and housing, its recreations and revolutions are there primarily because they serve the purposes of the tale. Nothing has been artificially inserted, and no one, except Baron Haussmann, Adolf Hitler, and some presidents of the Republic, discourses on the evolution of the drainage system or the transport network. A tourist who follows an uncharted course, like a train of thought, only later, after retracing the puzzle of streets on a map, recognizes how much knowledge can adhere to the accidental experience. I have tried to replicate the convenient mnemonic effect of a long walk, a bus ride, or a personal adventure, to create a series of contexts to which detailed information can be attached. Almost every historian of Paris notes the impossibility of giving a complete account of the city, and I am quite confident of having made this impossibility even more obvious than usual. This book is not intended as